Every about 5 or 6 charges, I'll check weigh one. This one 25.6. I've all my check weighed charges have been 25.5 or 25.6 grains, and that is just what the doctor ordered. So we're moving right along with this. I selected a load for those 50 grain soft point Speers that it shoots satisfactory. I would say it's not super duper tight, it's not super duper bad, but it's cheap. It's with Winchester 748 powder, and seems like the stuff is not always but almost always available. It's cheap, it's single base, it's ball, and so I just moved forward with it. It's not super sensitive to charge weights. It seems like it. That one's 25.5. It seems like it shoots exactly the same, whether it's 25.5, 25.2, 25.7. It shoots exactly the same place, exactly the same group. So that's what we moved forward with. Whenever I stop to weigh a charge, I seem to get mixed up. But so anyway, with it throwing charges, I'm sure it throws a 25.7 somewhere in there. I'm sure it throws a 25.3, a 25.4, but you know, in my testing it just shot exactly the same, and it actually shoots a better group with thrown charges with them all mishmashed than it did with my exact charge weight charges. So we're just rolling with it. It's easy on brass. It's a relatively low pressure load. I haven't chronoed it out of mine or Sadie's rifle. This is 223, by the way. I haven't chronoed it out of mine or Sadie's rifle, but it should be right around 3,000 feet per second. Not even close to the max. I'm pretty sure the max charge with this stuff is like 27 or 28 grains. I'd have to get in the book, but I remember that I was well over a grain below max, and I was 4 or 5 grains from a minimum charge. So it's just really gentle on brass, no primer flattening, no marks on the head, no marks for my extractors. It's just a really good, economical, safe plinking load with a bullet that I already know kills coyotes. And Sadie's AR got a red dot sight on it anyway, so it isn't exactly a precision machine anymore. The scope that was on it got put on my AR because the target scope got put on the 308. So you know, that being said, let's straighten this thing out here. So that being said, these are just plinking loads, hunting loads. They're riding around in the pickup. My rifle's sighted in with the 50 grain VMAX, and it's still driving tacks even with that little 3 to 9 powered scope. Hers, I put the red dot on it because we were having a little bit too much looking at coyotes instead of just putting crosshairs on them and shooting. I'm guilty of the same thing. I gotta have that perfect shot, when really if you just put a bullet or two in them, it's gonna do the job. So we switched to a red dot. She's dead eye with it at 100 yards. The only issue is that with a scope, we were within a couple inches of sight in from each other, so I could borrow her rifle, she could borrow mine. With the red dot, I'm like 8 to 10 inches off my groups, or some sort of parallax, how we mount the rifle, how we look down the sight. Something ain't quite the same, or ain't even close to the same. But so anyway, just wanted to show you that I use a powder measure for stuff that isn't sensitive. For some stuff that I really like to plink with and really punch paper, which is kind of a hobby of mine. I really like to drive tacks with it, but for this load, it's going to ride around the truck. We're not going to be sparing with it. I've still got like 850 of these, so we're not sparing. We're not sparing with Winchester powder. I've got a stack of small primers, about I don't know, 7,000, 6,000 or so. It's quite a bit. So I'm just not being sparing with these supplies, and we're just gonna shoot them. They're cheap. I already own the components. I've got hundreds and hundreds of pieces of brass from the range, and I'm gonna get probably at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 firings out of this brass because it's such a low pressure load. So that being said, that's what I'm doing. So one of the only issues I have with this is that these bullets are flat base, which that isn't an issue to me. I like flat base bullets, but I can't go ahead and just get them all stacked in a nice I can't get them all stacked in a nice tray. I gotta load the bullets one at a time because they just won't sit in those necks. So that's the only gripe. It slows down the process by, really it takes me about a half hour to load 50 rounds, and it slows down the process of 50 rounds by 3 to 5 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. It's pretty small gripe, because oftentimes when I've got them all stacked in the necks where they go, Zadie calls it putting a hat on them. When I got hats on them, sometimes I'll tip one over, or knock them off, spill them, whatever, and so it that slows down the process even more, because then I gotta weigh another charge or do whatever it is, or check a couple charges. Like if I spill and then spill some more, like I gotta check a couple that I didn't bounce some in or out of one. But so that's the only pain in the butt with bullet seating. So should be set here, so that, because I'm sure anybody interested in this either knows how or can look up how to seat a bullet. But that is the finishing process, the finishing procedure that we don't want to be seen as ammo manufacturing footage. So weighing charges is weighing charges, sizing brass is sizing brass. Those are all just hobbies, but the seating bullets part, you guys will have to look up on your own. But that's it. So that's 15 down, 35 to go, 85 to go. No, 35. Math is hard. And then I'm going to do 50 more, so we'll have, all told, 100 of these plinker rounds, and that'll be it. So one of the only pains in the ass about this whole process is these bullets are they're so slippery that I ended up having to crimp them. And I trim my brass every firing, even if it's just a thousandth or two that needs trimmed off. I trim my brass every time, but I found that even with trimmed brass, I could not find a money zone for taper crimping with an RCBS taper crimp, built-in taper crimp die. And part of that, I'm sure, is because these bullets don't have a cantilever, where if they were cantilevered bullets, the taper crimp would just crimp right into that cantilever, no problem. But I don't crimp anything else because I don't have a problem with anything else. I've chambered VMAXs, like my VMAX loads, over and over and over again, and never had the overall length change. I've chambered my my 73 grain ELD loads, my 75 grain hollow point boat tail loads. Never had any of them change in overall length, longer or shorter. But these particular little guys, Speer makes such a slippery bullet jacket, which I think is a good thing. They're slippery. But my overall length was increasing, so these guys were growing as they slammed into battery. Presumably they were growing a little bit. So I couldn't figure out the taper crimp, presumably because there's no cantilever on them, and so I was having my problems. So I went ahead and got a Lee factory crimp die, and so right now I am crimping the necks closed with a factory crimp die, and that's just what I do with this particular bullet only. I don't do it with every bullet. I do think it would probably change each load as to pressure. I might have to go through a new load development for each one, but this particular bullet, I developed all of my loads with a Lee factory crimp, and so this is pretty much the only Lee factory crimp die that I own, is in 223, and this is the only bullet of 223 that I feel the need to crimp. So anyway, I'm gonna finish these up and get on with my life. And just to put her in perspective here, this was the charge that I'm using, which is 25.5. This is 26.0. This is 25.0. And this is 24.5. So all told, those are about an inch. That one's about an inch and a half. That one's about an inch and a quarter. That one's about an inch and a half. That one's about an inch. So I selected 25.5. Said that any of the above would be good enough. And I mean, half a grain from there to there is a long ways. So we're just gonna trust that we're in the zone.